Warning, this content may be disturbing to some audiences. Subscribe, if you dare.
He yelled at him to stop. The man bent backwards and started to dislocate all his joints and crawl towards them. Hey everybody, welcome to ANECDOSED. People ask Reddit. Redditors who have seen a UFO, Bigfoot or any other creepy creatures. What is your story and how did the people you know react to your story?
Number 1.
When I was about 10 years old, I went on a field trip with my 4th grade class to a summer camp. For the most part, it was a typical experience. Rafting, bad food in the mess hall, hiking, campfires, etc. Hell, one of my friends did the typical movie thing and brought dirty magazines from home. We were supposed to be there for 4 days, I only lasted about 2. It was late at night cause I stayed up to do the trash duty and clean the mess hall. After I picked up the final granola bar wrapper, I made my way to the showers to clean up before turning in for the night. Halfway through, I hear a loud shuffling sound outside the showers. I stop what I'm doing and listen intently, but the shuffling stops. I assume it's my friends pranking me as they typically do, and get out of the showers. Just to put this into perspective, the showers and the boys' cabins are a good walk away with no way to illuminate your surroundings. That's why they shower before dark and with groups, to make sure nobody gets lost. For someone like me who's by himself having to navigate his way through the woods, it's pretty effing terrifying. To make matters worse, the flashlight I brought was back at the cabin. So I was stuck having to navigate my way back with a piece of dirt cheap lantern that barely gave me enough light. So anyway, I grab the lantern, and start my walk to the cabins. About halfway through I hear this ungodly loud moan coming from right the F in front of me. I panic and drop the lantern, running in the opposite direction of the sound. I can't see anything and in my haste I fall on something. I examine the thing I fell on and realize it's squishy and soaking wet. I hear the moaning again from behind me and book it to the direction of the cabins. I'm instantly greeted by 3 flashlights and concerned looks. Apparently the other campers heard the moans and the counselors went to investigate, only to find me covered in head to toe in effing blood. They brought me back to the cabins and I'm immediately bombarded with questions about what I saw. My friends shut them up after a while. The next day I went home. Could you blame me? I was not gonna stay there after all I've been through. I almost forgot about this incident until a while ago when I was reminiscing about this with one of my friends who stayed at the camp. I asked him what happened after I left and what he told me sent a shiver up my spine. Apparently after I left, the moans at night got louder and closer to the cabins and freaked everyone the F out, and as for that big mound I fell on, while the counselors were investigating the source of the moaning, they found a deer on the trail I was on. The head was ripped clean off, and its entrails were laying in a separate pile next to the carcass. That's my encounter. To this day, it remains the scariest experience I've ever had in my life. Everyone I've told thinks that I'm bullshitting it, but my friends who were there always defend me. I still don't know what the F was in the woods that night.
Number 2.
Finally, a chance to tell my story. About 10 years ago my family and I were up in the White Mountains of Arizona to cut down our Christmas tree. My dad was driving our truck with my grandpa in the front seat, and my mom and sister in the back seat. I was in the bed of the truck along with our family's German short-haired pointer. We were driving along a forest road, and all of a sudden my dog started barking and growling. So I looked to see what it is, thinking it is maybe a bear or mountain lion. What I saw was a tall dark figure walking parallel to the road about 60 to 70 yards away. I yelled at my dad to stop the truck. When I told him I think I saw Bigfoot, he just laughed and continued to drive. When I looked back to get another look at it, the figure had changed directions and was walking away from the road. The last thing I saw was the thing's head disappearing down a hill. To this day I still do not have an explanation for what I saw. Every time the situation comes up, my dad always makes me tell everyone my story, just so he can laugh at it.
Number 3.
Commenter. I've lived out in the middle of nowhere for about 10 years. I'm a smoker, and a night owl. I smoke outside. So I've seen some strange things. Distant points of light changing course and shooting off at extreme speeds. Probably meteorites deflecting off the atmosphere. I really don't think a visiting intelligence would have lights on a spacecraft. I've seen several instances of things like this. Maybe a dozen or so times. But the one thing I've seen that gave me chills and baffled me was a black oblong object, think cylinder/thermos, floating through the sky. It was darker than the night sky behind it, utterly silent, and maybe I'm misremembering, but I recall the night being completely silent too. No crickets, no cicadas. Just silence. This was in the middle of summer. I told my family, and they just shrugged their shoulders. Person B, weird. My husband described a very similar experience to me about a year ago that he had late the night before. It was a massive black object flying in utter silence. I vaguely remember him trying to wake me, but I sleep like a rock. The only difference was that he described it as chevron/boomerang shaped with several lights along the bottom. Made him pretty uneasy. Yes, right after he told me, I showed him pictures of a B-2 bomber thinking the same. He said it wasn't a triangle shape, more of a V, no center. Maybe his eyes were playing tricks on him and he just couldn't see the center, but who knows? We do live about 3 hours away from Malmstrom AFB, so it's always a possibility. Commenter: yeah. It definitely unsettled me. I had this feeling of deep, almost instinctual, I can't think of any other way to describe it, fear. Where you feel cold all over. I couldn't tell how big it was a completely cloudless night, so I had no frame of reference.
Number 4.
My dad and I were hunting in the mountains north of Idaho City. It was about twilight and we were hiking back to the car. We began to smell something terrible. Like burning bone and hair. It was the worst stench I've ever experienced. The smell got worse as we kept hiking. We could hear what we thought was someone or something running at a great rate of speed from behind us. My dad grabbed me and held my face to his chest and dropped to the ground. I held close to him as the running got louder. Dad readied his rifle. I heard him say, "Oh no. Son, stand up. Walk with me, look at the ground." Terrified I stood. Stupid me turned around and looked. There were the remains of an elk. The head looked like it had been put in a blast furnace. The hair on the body was all singed. The hoofs looked melted. The running was gone. We moved closer to the car. It was now nearly dark. About 100 yards from the car, we heard the running again and we froze. All of a sudden the forest lit up like noon. We heard a very loud whoosh, and it was gone. The forest was dark. It was quiet. Dead still. We booked it in the car. Threw our gear in the back seat and drove. I kept my head down and just cried. Dad was stoic and silent. Halfway out of the woods we saw the light again. Bright as ever. But just for a second. And then it was gone again. Made it back to Idaho City and stopped at the Gold Mine Grill to regroup. Went inside and there was another hunter in there. He looked at us and said, "Y'all see that shit?" He just stared and drank.
Number 5.
I've been dealing with seeing stuff like this for practically my entire life. I deal with hypnagogia, which is a condition that causes me to have extremely vivid hallucinations as I begin to fall asleep. Ever since I was about 7 I have dealt with seeing monsters, ghosts, aliens and pretty much anything else my mind could cook up, all hanging out in my bedroom. Needless to say, it scared the shit out of me for years. Although I've gotten used to it and generally ignore the things I now see, one story sticks with me. My great uncle Bob died when I was 8. The night after his funeral, I dreamed he walked past my bedroom door, wearing entirely white. He stopped and looked in on me, and then with a smile continued down the hall. I remember it being the first time I experienced one of these dreams and wasn't scared. Well, the next morning at breakfast, completely unprompted, my mom talked about this wonderful dream she had where Bob came into her room and sat with her. That was too much for me. I exploded into tears and was inconsolable. The thought that I had then, and I still sometimes deal with today. If Bob was really there, what other things that I had seen were really there too?
Number 6.
First one, I was with friends and we all saw it. We were hanging out at a park at night being typical teenagers, and saw a series of red, blue, green, and white lights spinning slowly in the sky. We couldn't see the actual aircraft, but the way the lights were spinning it gave off the impression that it was a plate-shaped object. We all basically stared at it in silence for 45 seconds or so until it just disappeared. Second time was by myself. I was laying out in my backyard and saw a silver disc in the sky. I thought it was a weather balloon at first, but then it started moving very quickly in a triangular pattern. You know the 3 points in a triangle. Picture it going from each point very quickly, taking a quick pause at each point. Like the first time, I watched it for about a minute until it vanished. Third time I was at a party, being held in a garage. I stepped out to the end of the driveway so I could make a call, and saw a slightly reflective black plate-shaped object hovering in the sky. At this point I was basically annoyed, like what the F? How many times am I gonna see these things and be scared shitless by them? Anyways, I watched it for a longer time than the first two, about 3 minutes, and then the sky flashes blue, picture a heat lighting type flash but blue, and it was gone. I asked the partygoers if they saw anything weird and they just said yeah, that random lighting. It's been 4 years since the last time I saw one. I'm pretty convinced I live near some secret military testing place or something. To see a UFO once is crazy, 3 times is almost unbelievable. I'm glad it hasn't happened again though, cause it's pretty scary to see.
Number 7.
Mine was a ghost. I was about 19. My grandmother had died less than a month prior. We were having a family gathering unrelated to her passing. I couldn't sleep, so I stayed up late watching some old Nick at Night reruns on their old tube. I drifted off on the couch around 2 a.m., partly wrapped in a rough green and brown handmade blanket a friend had made for me. I woke up between 3 and 4 a.m., felt cold and groggy. Looked up and saw my grandmother. "Go upstairs and sleep in a proper bed," she says. "Get moving." I picked up my blanket and dragged it behind me up the steep stairs. She looked better than when I had last seen her alive, but equally as insistent and daunting. I didn't dare refuse. Didn't occur to me until the next morning that she was, in fact, still dead, since this was the kind of thing she would do regularly before she passed.
Number 8.
Commenter. When I was deployed to Afghanistan, one of my frequent tasks was to help the guy flying the Raven, small UAV with an IR camera on it, at night, looking for insurgents planting bombs in the roads. Usually pretty boring. One night, however, we noticed a circular hot spot in the corner of the camera's view. After flying around a bit to get a better view, me and the operator were wondering what in the hell this featureless hot sphere was. In white/cold black/hot, this thing was solid, darkest black, and was unmoving for about 5 minutes. After which it rapidly moved down, nearly to the ground. We were flying at about 1,600 feet AGL, then back up into the sky and out of range of the Raven. We called up the TOC about this UFO, they said it must have been a glitch, they had nothing on satellite view in that area. When we went back to review the footage, kept on a specialized Toughbook laptop, the 5 minutes with the UFO in it were missing. Person B. I've read some very creepy stories from deployed men in Afghanistan. One of my students, I used to teach college courses, told me that he was on fire watch and saw a man approaching base from the empty desert. He yelled at him to stop. The man bent backwards and started to dislocate all his joints and crawl towards them. They raised their weapons and the thing evaporated. The weird thing was that it registered on the heat detection until it disappeared and several guys saw it. It wasn't just sleepy, stressed fire watch brains.
Number 9.
Okay, so I have a story that happened to me and my friends. To set the scene, we were on a Boy Scout camping/shooting trip. There were 20 to 30 of us. We were in a little cabin thing with windows on the front and back, and a front and back door. There were wooden tables all around the area. The adult cabin, with the bathroom, was about 1/8 of a mile down a gravel road in the dark. There was obviously a buddy system, because it's Boy Scouts. So it's around midnight, and everyone has been telling scary stories, like normal camping trips. Well, I had to go to the bathroom, and asked my friend to come along. He said sure, and he got our knives. We knew that there were bears in the woods, and it made us feel safer. Well, we went to the bathroom, and began our walk back. This is where it got scary. I felt an instinctual, not sure if that's the right word, fear. I looked at my friend, and he had the same look as me. We begin to walk a little faster, and unfold our pocket knives. I then turn around, and see it. It looked similar to a cat, but it was 6 feet tall, and was on its hind legs, kinda hunched over. I freaked the heck out, and started running. My friend sees it too, and we sprint back to the cabin. It began making a moaning/howling noise, it was somewhere between the two, and followed us slowly. We pound on the door, and the guys let us in. We told them what we saw, and they actually believed us. So we locked the front door, and looked at the back door. It had no lock. We pushed a table up against it, and had a kid there with his knife, for safety. We drew the blinds on all the windows that had them, one of them didn't, and we sat there, with all the lights on. Then we see the eyes outside of the windows without blinds. We all were shitting ourselves, and the thing slowly walked to the back door. We heard it bumping up against it, maybe trying to open it, we think. It then left, but we still thought we were going to die. No one slept. When the adults came to wake us up, we told them and they laughed and said we were making it up. We know it happened, even if they don't believe us. The look on his face was classic. It went from "I'm gonna kill this dude" to the look a prey animal gets when it knows it's F up. Hey everybody, welcome to ANECDOSED. People ask Reddit. Police officers, what's the dumbest thing you've ever seen a criminal do or say?
Number 1.
Drug arrest. I had a guy already under arrest for a domestic violence charge. I began to search his clothing for any weapons before I brought him to jail. In one of his pockets I found heroin and some needles. I asked him what it was. He said he had no idea what it was. I already knew exactly what it was. I asked him if it was his. He replied that he didn't know it was in his pocket. I asked how he didn't know. He replied that the pants he was wearing weren't his pants. Then proceeded to tell me he found the pants outside before I arrived and put them on.
Number 2.
We had a guy come in at the police department because he traded his PS4 for weed, but when he got it home he realized it was just tobacco. He wanted to press theft charges on the other guy for stealing his PS4. After the officer confirmed that this guy truly had called the police because he made a drug deal and got ripped off. He said it's not his fault you made a bad deal, and I would suggest you stop talking before you get yourself into trouble instead. I think he did end up talking to the other guy and convinced him to give the PS4 back, and warned him that dealing tobacco under the claim it was marijuana could still land him drug charges.
Number 3.
Commenter. I was waiting to report an incident at a local police station when a clearly deeply upset and agitated man came in wheezing and sweating. I wasn't in a rush so I let him go ahead of me. "I've been robbed, they took everything," he exclaimed when he reached the counter. The officer working the desk asked him the usual what, where, why and how sort of questions. The gentleman proceeds to explain that he was a local meth dealer and he just got robbed of his entire stash while selling to some teens at the local train station. The officer just said that there's not anything they can do about that and it's in his best interest to just leave before more questions are raised, and he incriminates himself further. He was fuming and stormed out of the place, slamming the door behind him. I reached the counter and made an offhand comment towards the office that must be a first for you. Apparently not. Apparently drug dealers often come in to report theft of their illicit substances. Person B. I'm confused as to why they don't arrest them when they confess like that. Person C. Lack of evidence probably. If he still has something on him it's a slam dunk, but if it's just his semi-confession it might get thrown out, and then that would be a bunch of work for little gain.
Number 4.
Dad's a detective. He had a murder case where a dog walker found a severed head in a park. Over the rest of the morning they found a full set of chopped up body parts around that park. A trail of blood led from each part, and they followed them all the way back to a nearby house, through the door and up the stairs to a room covered in blood with a guy asleep in a bed. Turns out this guy had got drunk with a friend, had an argument, killed him, chopped him up and hid his body parts in the park before passing out back at the house. Police caught him literally red-handed. Apparently he was really confused how they got him so quickly.
Number 5.
Retired cop here. Boy do I have stories. One dumbass move a guy did was he steals some poor girl's car. It was her first car, she worked full time. It was a sweet little thing and we felt so bad, she was crushed. Also in the car for some reason was her cell phone. So a colleague who has the gift of talking shit really well calls the number. Dude answers. It goes a little something like this. Cop. Mother effer, you stole my girlfriend's car. Bad guy. Bitch, I will F you up then F your bitch. Cop. Bring it mother effer, no cops, no friends, me and you, I'm at the Chevron on Main Street and 5th. Pussy, I'm calling your bitch ass out. Bad guy. Bitch, I'm on my way. Click. Me. No effing way he's coming. Yes, he showed up in the stolen car with a friggin' shaved key in the ignition he used to steal it. Dude rounded the corner and pulled into the gas station. We hid our cars behind it and then when he parked we boxed him in. He had a gun too. Effing idiot. On probation, he had a loaded gun. Came to us. The look on his face was classic. It went from I'm gonna kill this dude to the look a prey animal gets when it knows it's F-ed. A few months later in court the guy claimed the gun was not his. As we found it under the driver's seat. He said it must be hers. So F-ed up. But the jury didn't buy it. We saw him shoving something from his waist under his seat when he saw us. He was killed a few years later in a chase in another stolen car. Was ejected. DOA.
Number 6.
So working one busy Saturday night. There was a huge brawl with about 20 brothers in front of a club. You know. Affliction shirts, tap out shirts and Monster Energy hats with flat bills galore. LOL. So we got there and started grabbing dudes, searching real quick then stuffing them in the nearest car then jumping back into the fray because we were fighting with them too. So it all dies down and immediately we get a call, I forget what it was, But we gotta go, lights and sirens to it. I ran to my car, nobody in it. Sweet, I get to go. So I jump in my car and I'm hauling ass lights and siren to this new call for a few minutes, apexing turns. It's 2 a.m. and foggy, not really anyone on the roads. Remember that? 2 a.m. and foggy. So I'm rolling down this street in the fog with my lights and siren, and I see an object with a hoodie on its head slowly slide up behind me in my rear view. The jail is that way. Where are you taking me? I was going fairly fast on a straightaway and I nearly fucking stacked it up into a pole when I was scared shitless. I jerked the wheel and a little pee came out, I do admit. I pulled over and had to pace a few minutes outside the car to calm down. So the guy was stuffed into my car by some other officer, and because he was drunk he just laid down on the floorboard, put his hoodie on and passed out. I woke him up by yanking and banking and slamming him into the doors of the car. LOL. I took him back to the club and no officer claimed him. So I just took the dude home and we laughed about it the whole way. I told him I totally peed.
Number 7.
Not a cop but a corrections officer. 2 inmates got into a fight in a hallway. I was the closest to them and only saw the start of the fight out of the corner of my eye. In my report I wrote that I saw the 2 inmates fall to the ground with name on top of other inmate. Later, the hearing sergeant was reading the report to one of the inmates, so they could dispute any facts in the report they felt were untrue or biased. He asked the inmate if they wanted to dispute any facts in my report. The inmate said, "Yeah, we didn't fall to the ground." I grabbed the other inmate and slammed his ass on the floor. What would have been a simple fighting charge turned into an assault charge.
Number 8.
Friend's grandmother's house was abandoned and waiting to be sold. Squatter thieves broke in and took the valuable stuff. Then when they realized no one was using the house, they started staying there and bringing items that they had stolen from other houses to stash there. Cops came with dogs. Crook ran from the dog upstairs, then out the balcony door where there was once a balcony. Instead, he ran out a second-story door to nowhere and fell 2 stories. Police didn't have much trouble catching him after that. He was squatting there, and had looted the house, so how did he not know that that door went nowhere?
Number 9.
Commenter. Not a cop, but I know for sure this is one of the dumbest things I've ever seen someone do. Several years ago, some friends and I were hanging out when my friend brought along this new co-worker trying to get him out and about. Immediately we all knew something was off about this guy, but whatever, we were out until 3 in the morning before we called it a night. My friend is bringing me home and, just being an idiot, decides to swerve down the street before getting to my house. Well, we passed a cop car and the car hit its lights but had to turn around. By this point, I'm out of the car when the cop is pulling up on us and this new guy makes a run for my front door. Cop jumps out of his vehicle and demands all of us on the ground, just about waking up everyone in my neighborhood. Turns out, this dude had a warrant out for his arrest and he decided bolting out the car was the smartest move to make when a cop pulled up on us. Person B. So what was he wanted for? Commenter. Unpaid tickets from what I recall. Once the officer, and my parents, verified I lived there and we had no idea why he was trying to run into my house, they let us go and told us to close the door.
Number 10.
Many years ago I was a paramedic in NYC and got involved with a stabbing theft. It was a chain snatch gone bad and the snatcher and snatchee both shanked one another. The one kid lost his femoral and died on the street. The spread of the blood on wet concrete was amazing. It seemed like 20 people bled to death there. The attempted snatcher took off running, but the cops were pretty sure he didn't get far, so we all fanned out to look for blood trail or his unconscious self. Long story short, there was a chrome plating and engine machine shop on one corner of the block. The kid had crawled up a stack of pallets and across a storage container and pushed in a jalousie type window. He didn't know it was over the acid dip tank. They put big diesel blocks in to clean them before work. He put up a hell of a fight trying to get out but was found Monday morning partially dissolved.
Number 11.
I was a policeman at the time. In the middle of the night my partner and I found a car in a cemetery. Stolen cars were dumped there regularly. The car had its windows down and it had only recently been left there. It was still warm to touch. It didn't flag up as stolen and through the window I could see a meth pipe in plain view. That gives us the ability to search the car. Inside we find a bunch of meth pipes, 3.5 grams of meth, a small amount of cannabis and a handgun. There was also a tablet/phone that was unlocked, and while we were searching the car the tablet kept on receiving messages from people trying to score meth. I had a quick look through the phone, and was able to figure out that the owner of the car had come out from the city. I worked rurally at the time, to make a score from one of the local gangs. But the gang didn't want her turning up, so arranged to meet her at the cemetery and conduct business somewhere else. I leave a business card under the wipers, not my card but the station's, and on the back I wrote that she, the owner of the car, should come down to the station if she wants to get her stuff back. And sure enough she did. At 9 the next morning, methed up, looking for her drugs and gun. When the woman came in she refused to give her name. She was just insistent that the police had robbed her and she wanted back what was taken. The bottom of my hand connected right under his nose. He doubled over and I bolted. I heard later his lip got stuck in his braces. Hey everybody, welcome to ANECDOSED. People ask Reddit. People who have snapped on a bully at school. What's your story?
Number 1.
This happened in 8th grade. I was bullied from the beginning of 7th grade and one day, I decided to report him. I got bullied for reporting the bully. I got so mad that one day after church I beat him up in the parking lot. I made sure I didn't beat him up enough to have to call an ambulance but enough to hurt. He didn't mess with me from then onwards.
Number 2.
High school. One girl made my life hell. I didn't even know her or fully understand why she targeted me. She tried to run me over and told cops I walked in front of her car. One day walking up the stairs, she proceeded to taunt me, hitting me in the back with objects and calling me names. I stopped, turned around and punched her in the nose. She landed on her back on the landing. I just stood over her and said, "What now, bitch?" She never said one word to me after that.
Number 3.
5th grade. Can't remember what specifically caused me to snap, but after spending the last 5 years being continually harassed, bullied, and assaulted by a specific boy, I'd had enough. I calmly walked to the mounted pencil sharpener at the back of the class and sharpened my pencil to a very fine tip. Then, I walked behind said bully, and in a downward motion slashed him across the entirety of his back in one fluid motion. Obviously, I got a truckload of shit for what I did. Principal insinuated to my mother that the parents of the other boy may want to press charges for my harming of their pride and joy. My mother, bless her heart, retorted back, "If that's the case, perhaps I should press charges considering how often my son has been coming home with cuts, bruises and welts administered at their boys' hands without repercussions from your staff." The principal moonwalked out of that conversation so effing fast. I still read the riot act at home, though. Got drilled into me that what I did was use a weapon to harm someone, and that it would never be tolerated at any level. Grounded for a very, very long time. Bully gave me space, for a while anyway. Went back to his usual torment after a couple weeks, minus any physical contact.
Number 4.
I had been bullied all year long by this guy and it was the last week of 8th or 9th grade. Comes up to me and says something about my clothes or something and I just saw red. I turned around and hit him with a palm strike to the face. The bottom of my hand connected right under his nose. He doubled over and I bolted. I heard later his lip got stuck in his braces and he had to go to the doctor to fix it. I got a stern talking to about not hitting people, although my teachers were aware of the verbal bullying.
Number 5.
Not at school, but I was 12 and a kid on my block constantly challenged me to fight him because he knew I didn't want to, so it was a great way for this chubby, incompetent brat to show off. One day, outside the convenience store, to his surprise I accepted. He came towards me and I basically just lifted up my leg and kicked him in the stomach. Honestly, he just bounced off my foot. In shock, he came at me again. This repeated about 3 times as the expression of disbelief on his face became more pathetically pronounced. He finally gave up and ran home past my house, telling my mother, who happened to be outside, that I beat him up. But she already knew about his behavior towards me, so as soon as I explained what happened, it was all good. He wasn't actually hurt physically, just emotionally. We both learned a good lesson that day, and he actually grew up to be a decent guy from what I could tell.
Number 6.
The bully would always grab my ass or slap my neck, say rude things about my nationality and insult me. I often told him to stop that, but he never did. For a year and a half. Once, in a lecture, he came to my desk and grabbed my ass. I had a really bad day that day too. The moment he grabbed my ass, I saw red. I was mad. I stood up and looked him in the eye. I took his head and smashed it against the wall with all I had. Nothing serious happened to him. Except for the teacher being mad at him for bothering me. I was a quiet and good-hearted kid, and the teacher knew that. By the way, I'm a guy. And that asshole wasn't even gay. Or maybe he was, but never admitted it.
Number 7.
Commenter. I was 7 and I was a nice kid with average grades and this one bully that was taller than me. He used to be any typical bully like, trip you on your lunch, and push your head for no apparent reason. I was getting annoyed that I felt the red heat go all over my body. I looked at him and told him to stop. I looked at him, he pushed me to the ground. I stopped and kicked his tables and punched his nose with all my force. His nose started to bleed and I was sent to the office. My mom had this thing where if they started it then she'll pretend that she's mad at me at school and come home saying congrats. Person B. That's one of the few nice things my father ever did. If a bully pushed far enough that I had to defend myself, he showed up angry as hell that teachers ever let it get to the point that I had to defend myself. One of his rules for fighting in school is that I should never initiate a fight, but I should defend myself when it comes to it.
Number 8.
There was a girl I was friends with who had a boyfriend. There was nothing going on between us, but her boyfriend was older and used to call me names and throw shit at me in the halls. I'm not a particularly confrontational person, so I let it go on like that for a while. There was a day when he knocked my books out of my hand and I had had enough. He wasn't nearly as big as I was, so I picked him up by his shirt and slammed him against a locker. The bullying stopped.
Number 9.
One of my most vivid memories of my youth. When I was 9, my babysitter's granddaughter took me next door to play on her friend's swing set. For some reason her friend's little brother got really pissed off that I was on his property. No idea what the F his problem was, think he was just having a bad day and needed to take it out on someone. Anyway, instead of leaving like the brat told me to, I just kind of stood there staring at my babysitter's granddaughter and her friend like, is it okay that we're over here? This ticks the brat off more and he storms over and punches me in the stomach. Should not have been a big deal, the kid was like 6 and I was like 9, but I happened to be standing at the edge of a small cliff above a drain ditch, and he managed to knock me back into the mud and I had to go back to my babysitter's, take off my dress and underpants and put on some of her granddaughter's clothes. I wasn't hurt, but it was really embarrassing. When my stepdad came to pick me up, the babysitter told him what happened. My stepdad didn't have an expression on his face after hearing about this. He calmly went next door, where the little brat was sitting on the front porch being a brat, and asked, calm as F with his arms folded, did you hit my girl? That little boy's face went white. My stepdad's a big machine guy and probably looked like a giant to this kid. Brat didn't answer. My stepdad asked again. The kid looked down and nodded. My stepdad, still effing monotone, responded, you ever go near my girl again, and you'll be lucky if I just knock on that door and get your parents out here. Then my stepdad just turned around and came back over and took me home. I never felt more loved. Interestingly, my babysitter's granddaughter wasn't allowed to bring me with her to her friend's house after that.
Number 10.
When I was younger, my sister was getting bullied by some F-ers and I was too young to do anything. My dad got pissed off and went into the school. He grabbed one of them by the neck and pushed him against a wall, while his great friends ran away like little cowards. End of the story. They never got close to me or my sister ever again. I know it's kind of messed up for a grown man to do that, but the school wasn't solving the problem and it was getting worse every day.
Number 11.
My daughter was being bothered by 3 boys in junior high. She was kind of busty for her age and they kept bumping into her, and trying to look down her shirt, etc. She asked them time and again to stop, but they kept on. One day at lunch, her younger brother, a grade lower, got angry and beat the living shit out of all 3 boys, right there in the lunchroom. He was suspended for a week, but I was so damned proud of him. I went to the school and gave them an ugly piece of my mind. I wasn't nice either. Pissed me off, but I supported his actions 125%.
Number 12.
6th grade. A few days before the end of the school year. Beat my bully's ass and didn't stop even with teachers saying so. The bully stopped, but I was sick and tired of his shit. Lucky me, I didn't have to come in for those remaining 3 days. Best of all was that my parents were on my side.
Number 13.
4th grade. This kid named Nick used to punch me every day at recess. I went home one day crying about it, and my dad told me to punch him back. So the next day when Nick came around to punch me, I whipped around and just beat the snot out of him. Absolutely wailed on him. One of the teachers noticed and took us to the principal's office, and we got off with warnings. After that, Nick never punched me again, but would make sure I could get to the front of the line for the drinking fountain and picked me first for any sports game he was team captain for.
Number 14.
My second in France, like 15 years old, bully decided to sit next to me in class, repeatedly whispered insults to me, and at one point I snapped, took his head and bashed it into the desk. I think I would have been in deep shit had his textbook not been there. Needless to say, I got kicked out of that class and had to change English group.
Number 15.
I was being bullied for like a month when I was 13 or 14. Some guy from my class started messing with me, pushing, hair grabbing, neck slapping, stuff like that, and I didn't know how to handle it. One of his friends from another class, a guy I had never spoken to before, tried it once and I instinctively punched him in the face. Bullying stopped. If that random guy didn't do what he did, I don't know how I would have put an end to it, to be honest.
Number 16.
5th grade. This dude who always picked on me was kicking my seat in an assembly, and I was having a terrible week and this was my last straw. I turned and punched him in the face, but I wasn't satisfied with the first punch because it felt weak, so I figured I'm already going to be in trouble, so I went back for a second better punch that felt worth getting in trouble over. Also, this was a DARE assembly, which was about saying no to drugs and violence, so I basically learned nothing. The kid got in a horrible car accident and died at the hospital, and his name is the one the board spelled. Hey everybody, welcome to ANECDOSED. People ask Reddit. Redditors who have used a Ouija board. Anything interesting happen?
Number 1.
I don't know what it is about Ouija boards that makes them work, but I have non-superstitious friends that will never touch them again. My first experience came when I was 21 years old. The entire night, we'd been getting mixed responses from different evil spirits with names like Burza or Kazas. There were tons of accurate hits from each evil spirit and an equal amount of inaccurate ones. They'd tell us something that was true but put an incorrect date on it or spell a name wrong. It wasn't until one of the spirits claimed to know me that shit got weird. Many years ago, I watched my friend beat his family dog to near death and poison it with antidepressants. I was too scared of him to stop him and let him kill the poor animal. Fast forward to a couple years later and something on the Ouija board targets me, claiming I had murdered it. At first I was asking its age and when it died, then I asked if it was human, it said no. That was when I noticed that my friends all had their eyes closed, so I took my hand off the eye and asked what the spirit's name was. It spelled the dog's name that my shitty friend had killed and was proof enough, to me at least, that Ouija boards were real. My friends still don't believe I took my hand off the eye, and none of them knew about the story until that happened. In my experience, Ouija boards are real and they work.
Number 2.
I went to my uncle's house since my extended family was in town. He goes to garage sales all the time and picks up a Ouija board. My mom used one when she was a teenager and told me she had a bad experience with one. She was with her friends and they were asking the Ouija board questions. One of her friends' babies died suddenly a few months prior to them playing with it. My mom, and a few of her friends asked her how the baby died. The planchette, I think it is called, started moving to the M, then the A, then back to the M, then to the A again, spelling out mama. They instantly freaked out, obviously. Little did they know that in popular Ouija lore, mama is actually a Ouija board demon. They kept asking it questions and it was getting vulgar. It was saying, F him when they asked about whether or not my mom and dad were going to get married. It was answering questions that it shouldn't know. After the experience, my mom and her friends were scared and crying, and they buried it. Fast forward about 22 years and here I am. We are at my uncle's house and he pulls the board out. My mom was nervous, as was I. As nervous as I was also curious. We decided to play with it. It was just my mom and I with other family members around. We asked random questions and then started asking questions that neither my mom or I knew but others in the room did. It was answering the questions correctly. I was nervous as hell but wanted to talk to it more. I asked what my future career was going to be and it said Walmart. I never spell it with 2 L's and neither does my mom. I worked there. I asked it what my Aunt Pam's favorite band was. It started spelling out FUCK and that is when I let go of the planchette. I was scared. At that point I knew I wasn't talking to a good entity. I asked it who it was. It spelled out LEVIATHAN. I was pretty nervous and was about to tell my mom we should be done and tell it goodbye, but I just wanted to know what it wanted. I was stupid and asked it. I said, "What do you want?" It replied with, "Tree fitty." I was scared to death and threw it into a fire. It was a horrible experience and I do not recommend ever playing with one. Especially since Leviathan is a prehistoric dinosaur-type Loch Ness monster. It was seriously the scariest thing that has ever happened to me and prompted me to immediately do my research on the topic.
Number 3.
My friends and I are lifeguards, and we had a slumber party one night at the pool and brought a Ouija board. One of my friends didn't partake, because he actually believed in that stuff, but the others and I don't, so we thought it'd be a fun time. We're out on the pool deck, and are trying to ask dark questions to freak out our non-participant friend. One guy next to me asks, "How will I die?" And the board spells out "cut fuck." We all start cracking up, and the friend that asks falls back from laughter and slices his head on an upside down lawn chair behind him, then yells, "Ah, fuck." His head was bleeding so much and it was just kinda perfect timing. The one friend who was sitting out freaked out about it too.
Number 4.
We were 17. Myself and a couple of my friends played with one in a cemetery at midnight. It was my best friend and a couple of close girlfriends from school. Nothing was happening. He kept playing and nothing was happening. My best friend started to get frustrated with the game and started yelling and provoking the spirits. I did not want the girls to think I was scared or lame, so I joined in on the provoking. After yelling at the invisible ghosts for 5 minutes, we decided to pack it up and leave. All of us traveled in my friend's brand new Toyota Tacoma that she bought 2 days prior. The problem was that the truck would not start. It was completely dead, odd because the truck was completely turned off with the keys out of the ignition. Then all of a sudden the truck lights turn on, then go off again, then turn back on at half power. The truck radio turned on and off several times before it started to blare static at full volume for a few seconds, then the vehicle went off again. My friend Ashley turned the key again to start the truck and it turned on and we drove out. It was weird that everyone I was with thought it was funny and really thought nothing of it. I did not sleep at all that night.
Number 5.
On a trip back to the islands for my grandpa's funeral, a pregnant cousin of mine, my older brother and sister, and I decided to try to talk to our recently passed grandfather. Now everyone back in the islands are very superstitious, so there are no Ouija boards available there, so we had to make one out of cardboard and a magnifying glass. We wait till the night after the funeral and head down to the beach behind our grandma's house and start summoning the spirits. All of us never really believed in spirits, so we started off just effing around and asking if Elvis or Michael Jackson could speak to us, but when we did finally ask for my grandpa, everything started feeling eerie as F. The magnifying glass started to move and it moved to the letter S before my grandma came running down the hill yelling at us, "What have you done? What have you done?" and started hitting us. None of us really thought anything of it until the next night my cousin had a miscarriage. I'm not sure if it was just a coincidence or not, but I don't F around with Ouija boards anymore.
Number 6.
My grandmother recently moved from her old house in the middle of nowhere to our neighborhood so my parents could keep a closer eye on her. While cleaning out her garage, me and my brothers found an old Ouija board. My mom told us to throw it out, to burn it, but being teenagers we wanted to keep it and mess around with it. We brought it back to our place and I guess it just moved from room to room for a while when we would look at it. We never really used it until one night when me and one of my best friends from high school got curious. We decided to look up how to actually use it online. While playing it, I thought I would freak out my friend and moved my hand to spell out things I thought would be true. We would ask it stuff like, "Where am I going to college?" and shit. My friend freaked out and thought it was real, but I knew better. My mom was home and he was explaining to her what happened. She advised us to actually use it and ask the board something neither of us knew. She told us to ask it what her grandmother's maiden name was. I had absolutely no idea, and I'm fairly certain my friend didn't either. So we went back to the room and started messing around with it again. We asked it the question and then I don't know what happened, if I subconsciously knew what the answer was or something else happened, but it spelled out a peculiar name. I think it was something like Muraina. Anyways, after we spelled it out the name, I went to ask my mom if that's what it was, and she said yes. There was no way my friend knew, or she told him because he was with me the entire time and I didn't know as well, but that was the name. My mom told us to get rid of it after that and what happened when she was a teenager using it. Apparently she was at a party with a few other girls when she was in high school and they had asked who would be the first person in their class to die. After a few weeks she said there was a kid who got in a horrible car accident and died at the hospital and his name is the one the board spelled.
Number 7.
When I was 14 or 15, my best friend and I got a Ouija board. We immediately started talking to a spirit who introduced herself as Mama. Mama answered all of our silly questions for a while. Nadia had a crush on Zach, future honeymoon would be to Hawaii, all the normal teenage girl questions. After a while, I guess Mama got bored and called us bitch. Which was really profoundly upsetting because we were Mormons at the time. She then started figure eighting like crazy. We put her away. After that, whenever we pulled out the old Ouija board, we would start out speaking with some random spirit, and it would be very mundane, until Mama would butt in by going mama 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 mama, figure eighting, quickly going from the sun to the moon, and calling us all sorts of colorful words. This had been happening for ages, and we decided to do something about it. We read online about exorcism and evil spirits from Ouija boards. It called for all sorts of things, including juniper candles. We settled for Bath and Body Works fruity something or other, as it was what we had on hand. We also collected a few Bibles and Book of Mormons, and a framed picture of the Mormon prophet at the time for good measure. We set everything up, with the board propped a few inches above the ground over a Bible, fruity candles twinkling, Prophet Gordon B. Hinckley watching on solemnly. We started by reading some silly incantation that I'm 100% sure looking back was just silly mumbo jumbo and not anything of worth. Our setup, while honestly quite useless against an irritable demon, proved at least annoying. Mama was pissed from the get-go. She started with a furiously quick mama 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 that almost threw the planchette off the board. Then she started cursing, upping the ante with FS and C words, which up until this point hadn't been used. Then, she started spiraling the planchette in wild circles, as if she were trying to dig her way out. Looking back, everything so far would be something I could attribute to two silly teens, impressionable and scared and letting themselves be caught up in the moment. But then the light bulb exploded. I have no explanation for why that board was peppered with glass at the exact moment the planchette stopped its fervent dance. Maybe it was faulty wiring. An electrical surge. I haven't touched a Ouija board since. So he gets to the job and his boss's boss, male, starts hitting on him ridiculously. Hey everybody, welcome to ANECDOSED. People ask Reddit. People no longer bound by their non-disclosure agreement. What can you now disclose?
Number 1.
I signed an NDA after negotiating a six-figure settlement with my mortgage lender. Back in 2013. The bank illegally sold my home while I was living there and making monthly payments. I discovered this when new owners evicted me and my 3 kids. At the time, I thought someone was trying to steal my identity, etc. I spent the next 2 years writing legal documents and had to represent myself in court. The bank owned every legit legal firm I contacted. Also, the first lawyer I hired took my last $7,000 and was promptly disbarred for misconduct with previous cases. I had no money, no home, but I had a laptop, printer and access to the county court law library. We were about a week away from selecting a jury, when we came to a settlement agreement. Which bank? You ask. I can't tell you the name, but might I suggest that it rhymes with case. I received a posting on my front door. I went to the eviction court and lost, because technically the new owners paid for my house. I was given 7 days to move all my stuff, we had lived there 13 years, or face the sheriff. I had 3 kids. I didn't want the drama of handcuffs. So we packed and moved, then sought relief through the court system. They settled because they were worried that if the case went to trial, it would become public. Then, everyone would know, for certain, that they had lied, cheated and swindled to steal homes from hardworking people. The bank would lose when no one took out new loans with them. In the end, each of my kids, now in their 20s, got an expensive new car and I live at the beach.
Number 2.
That married grocery store manager in his late 40s was, indeed, having sex with that 17-year-old courtesy clerk in the compressor room. This was 15 plus years ago when I was a person in charge, and not yet a full assistant store manager. Our store in the back room had a couple of rooms upstairs, a large room that housed all of our electrical breakers and backup generators, and a room that housed all of our compressors that kept our freezers and coolers running. Both were locked at all times for security reasons. They were accessible only through the back room. The 17-year-old courtesy clerk, Bagger, had worked there for a while. She was, not the best worker. She had a habit of disappearing for a half hour or hour at a time. I, and the other picks complained and tried discipline, but the store manager blocked it. So, we just dealt with it. Yes, she was an attractive blonde. I was in charge one night and we got an alarm that one of the compressors was low. It was my job to check the level, record the compressor number, and turn it in. When I went up to the room, the door was propped open with a bucket. I assumed whoever worked in the room last left it open. If you have never been in a compressor room before, I have to tell you that it is loud. Our store had several diesel engines that powered the compressors. I proceed into the back of the room, come around a corner to see the girl, not quite naked, but not fully clothed, being serviced by our store manager, who had left for the day hours ago. Neither saw me and I hightailed it out of there. Looks like she was decompressing the manager. I wrestled with what to do. I was worried about my career at the time, so I called the security hotline and made an anonymous call and told them in vague terms what happened, and that they should contact me about details. I'm 100% certain that they knew it was me that called. A couple of days later, the store manager was suspended, and I'm interviewed, the assistant store manager is interviewed, and the pics. They tell us not to discuss it, so of course we did. I was a little late to the party. Almost everyone knew. The store manager would use his store keys to come into the back room, meet the courtesy clerk, and then would hook up in the compressor room. She was not the first teenager he had done this with at this store and others. They fire the store manager, and like an idiot, he sues. Dozens of people are deposed, NDAs are drawn up and signed. He thinks better of it, drops the suit, and that's the last I ever heard of him. The girl quit right after the store manager was suspended.
Number 3.
It's not an NDA. It's a secrecy agreement with DoD that elapsed after 25 years. I worked as a programmer for the U.S. Air Force on the global USAF budget in 1979 through early 1981. There was a period of time after Reagan became a leading candidate, but before he won the election or took office. Jimmy Carter was a lame duck president, and many senior officers really hated him. During this time, the USAF had flown the B-1. Not the B-1A, not the B-1B, this was when it was just the B-1. People had spent a significant portion of their careers working on delivering the B-1 program. They really believed in the B-1 as a strategic long-range supersonic bomber. Jimmy Carter hated the B-1. He viewed it as a wasteful, unnecessary, bloated program designed to keep the builders afloat at the expense of the taxpayer. He had canceled the project in something like 77. But a couple number flying examples were available, but never to see service. Reagan loved the B-1. It was everything he loved about our military programs. Fast, sexy, high-tech, and better than anything the Soviets had. All of that being said, here's what happened. Jimmy Carter gave explicit orders that the only 2 B-1s currently flying be broken up into parts, the program completely cancelled, the engineering materials be archived at the Pentagon, and all funding ended. He wanted direct evidence sent to him that this had happened, in the form of pictures of the broken up aircraft. Ronald Reagan was informed of this order by sources in our organization. Reagan let it be known that Carter's order was absolutely not to be followed under any circumstances. Now, where do I come in? I was just this guy working on the AF budget. It was a top secret clearance, mainly because any analyst could correlate money to named projects, both globally and on basis. So, one day I am going over daily reports and I see this massive new expenditure for Wright-Patterson. It's not in the approved project list. It's not in the unapproved project list either. So clearly, it has not gone up to Congress. Yet, the money is actually in the dispersal. So I go to my boss and I point it out. It doesn't belong there, so obviously it's a mistake. He agrees, and we reverse it. A couple of days later, all hell breaks loose when a general officer I had never seen before comes rampaging through the office demanding to know who shorted his funding. Now, at this point we get hauled into a room, sworn to secrecy, and told to fund this maintenance project. What was the project? Pay a huge team of contractors to very carefully disassemble one of the B-1s, drag in parts from other aircraft, show it being crushed, and send pics to Carter. Meanwhile, reassemble the plane and hide both of them inside black hangars. And that was why Reagan was able to have the program restarted literally within days of taking office. The program was fully back online in 1981.
Number 4.
Commenter, not me but my cousin. He was working his first job in marketing in one of the top marketing firms in the country. My cousin is ridiculously good looking, used to be a model for A&F, not just the local store models, but one of the national models, and dresses well. So he gets to the job and his boss's boss, male, starts hitting on him ridiculously. He's invited to lunch, dinner, and asked if he wants to go to the boss's weekend home, all the time turning him down. One time in the car his boss told him how quickly he would advance if he spent the weekend with him, and my cousin recorded the entire conversation. He nopes the boss and then ghosts him on invites for weeks until the boss stops asking. Fast forward to 3 months after he's hired and he's doing his review with HR and his immediate supervisor is there. He starts to hear about how he's not a good fit, not a team player, etc. They let him know they were terminating him, and he grabbed the paperwork they wanted him to sign and put it in his pocket. Then he pulled out his phone and played his boss's recording. After he was done, he looked at the HR manager and asked if she had anything to say. They both left the room acting shell-shocked and he stayed there in the conf room until the HR manager came back an hour later. She put her boss on the conference line and they started telling him it was illegal to record private conversations, they would file charges, etc. He laughed and told them he would go to the press, and that he knows they would love to put him on TV. 3 days later he signed a non-disclosure and picked up a check almost big enough to pay for his 3 years of law school. For anyone wondering, no, the guy who harassed him was not fired, and he has since been promoted again by the company. Person B. The recording issue depends on the state. I happen to live in a single-party recording state, which means that recording a conversation is legal as long as one person taking part in it knows. You don't have to disclose to anyone else in the conversation that you are recording it. This saved my ass a bunch of years back when I got into a thing with my boss. At one point he lost his shit and I was recording the interaction. A few months later he wrote me up, saying that I had been the one who started everything and was yelling at him, which would have meant I was ineligible to work on a project that would have led to a pretty nice bonus. I went 2 levels above him. I knew that this person hated my boss, and played the tape. My boss was called in and told to remove the write-up from my file. He refused. He was told that I had proof and if I was unable to work on the project, they would ultimately have to give me the bonus anyway, with the funds coming from his budget, which would later affect his performance bonus. Still no. My boss left the meeting and went back to his office and beat the hell out of his garbage can, all the time claiming I had set him up. I ultimately was moved to a different department, meaning my line was taken away from him so he had one less person in his department, and got to work on the project. The next year, my ex-boss suddenly had to retire early. Thank God for living in a single recording state. I highly recommend everyone check the laws in the state they live in.
Number 5.
Commenter. I disclosed to a minority partner that the majority partner owed him $100K. He could have easily received a check for that amount, but he sued for $700K, spent $300K on a lawyer and got nothing. This CEO would have paid. I explained it to him and he agreed. It was all super clear in 2 pages of documents. The guy suing brought so much other stuff to the table that it created a giant confusing smoke screen. I had told him that was exactly what was going to happen. His lawyer spent 6 months on it before talking to me, the only person who knew what happened. It was absolutely bizarre. I spent a full day on the witness stand and the lawyer never even asked me about the $100K, which was the only real issue. I snuck it in, as part of another answer, but it was a fart in a hurricane. Should have, but his lawyer sucked so bad that he didn't even want to talk about the $100K. I made it very clear that there wasn't anything else there, but he subpoenaed boxes of bank records to rifle through. I went over there and told him that there was nothing to find, but he was just going through bank statements hoping to find something. It's like someone stole $500 from you and it was on video, but you accused them of murdering your grandfather, and they were arrested for murder and go on trial, and the trial goes on for a week and you never mention the $500. Person B. I saw the owner of a company I worked for do the same thing. A sales employee sued for not getting proper commissions and the CEO easily paid 10 times that amount fighting it in court, only to lose and have to pay anyways. Guy committed suicide in the barracks one morning. Hey everybody, welcome to ANECDOSED. People ask Reddit. Serious. Armed service members of Reddit, what is one story from boot camp that you will never forget?
Number 1.
We were in the second phase of training, which meant we were at the shooting range. Half of the recruits would fire in the morning, and half in the afternoon, with a break for lunch in between. One of my good friends was singing to himself under his breath while he was pulling out the contents of his MRE, meals ready to eat. One of the drill instructors, Drill Instructor A, overheard him, and demanded to know who it was. This recruit was singing. The recruit sheepishly replied, knowing full well what was to come. "Oh, we wanna sing, huh? Tight, hope you like dirt," the drill instructor replied, a twinkle in his eye knowing he was about to make a recruit's life hell. Another drill instructor B, from another platoon in the company overhears the commotion, and wants to know what is happening. Recruit X wants to sing, drill instructor A replies. Drill instructor B, being a bit more experienced and a bit more cunning, has something else in mind than standard IT. "Tell me who you were singing to," he demands. Recruit X is sitting next to Recruit Y, and tells the drill instructors that he was singing to Recruit Y. A devilish smile crosses the face of drill instructor B, who orders both recruits X and Y to undo the clips on their Kevlar helmets. He then ordered them to clip one another's Kevlars, recruit X's male end into Y's female end, and vice versa. At this point, the two recruits are clipped into one another's helmets, their faces are close enough to the point where they are practically Eskimo kissing. Drill instructor B, satisfied with his work, practically whispers into recruit X's ear, "Now sing." Without missing a beat, recruit X begins to belt out "Somewhere Over the Rainbow." "I lost my bearing and got sent to the dirt, but it was completely worth it." He also says it was worth it. Those were the kinds of things that made boot camp bearable.
Number 2.
I was not the one in boot camp, but a very good friend of mine was, and I managed to make it a living hell for him by thinking I was funny. My friend mailed me a letter, this was back in the late 1980s, to say hi and give me his mailing address in boot camp. He asked me to send him some pictures of our friends. So, I wrote back and included half a dozen pictures. 5 of them were normal pictures of our group of friends doing things. One of them was a picture from our high school graduation where we all lifted up our gowns, bent over, and slapped ourselves on the ass. The picture basically just shows 8 asses lined up bent over. It's pretty funny and we all laughed about it when we took it. Well, I didn't know his drill instructor was going to show them to everyone. Apparently, he opened the letter, looked through the pics and made fun of them, then got to the ass picture and asked my buddy if he liked man ass. When my buddy said no, the DI then said, "Well then, why would someone send you a picture of nothing but man ass?" And he showed the pic to the entire group. Everyone was laughing and my buddy became known as Man Ass Lover, or Mal for short. That nickname stuck with him through boot camp. About a year after boot camp, he was stationed in Texas and was hanging out with a couple of other guys he worked with when they ran into someone he went to boot camp with. That guy brought up the nickname and his new buddies started using it. So, my funny picture got my buddy labeled Man Ass Lover for his entire military career. He was not what you might call pleased about it.
Number 3.
MCRD San Diego, very early on in the cycle. It's early morning, we are marching in formation to the Chow Hall. It's dark, and I am in the leftmost of 4 marching columns, close to one of our drill instructors. There is a rather overweight recruit in front of me. This young man's recruiting command let him come to training before he was ready, but he's here now, and the DI walking next to him is sizing him the F up. After maybe 15 long seconds of contemplation, the DI leans in and hisses, "Boy, I'm going to sweat the Crisco out of you." I snorted and was righteously screamed at for losing my bearing. Hoorah!
Number 4.
Guy committed suicide in the barracks one morning. We were like 3rd or 4th week in Army basic training, which is pretty much nothing but the shooting ranges. When you come off the range, you're supposed to be searched for ammo, but complacency is a thing and it's a half-assed search. Well, the kid was being a F up as usual. One morning after chow, when the drill sergeant got on his ass about it, he started giving him the death stare, which pissed off DS even more. After the ass chewing and punishment, they told us to go get our shit ready to go to the range. Typically, this kid was the last to do anything, but that day he was the first to go upstairs after chow, which we kind of joked about. Maybe he needed to take a shit because we never saw him move that fast. Can't find this effing kid and we're running late. Guy goes to check the latrine and he's dead in there apparently, and screams for DS. DS runs in there, comes out and tells me to call 911, but their little office was locked so I couldn't. I didn't see him, but the guy who did was pretty F up for a while. The guy who killed himself was kind of a piece of shit the whole time, starting fights, stealing shit, getting us in trouble. I was not upset he was gone. Apparently he had stolen rounds off the range, and was about a second away from killing the DS, but decided not to for whatever reason. We didn't see that DS for a few weeks. Searches after the range took hours after this incident. Several people pissed themselves waiting to be searched and cleared. We didn't train for weeks due to a CID investigation which sucked. We just cleaned the barracks, went to chow, then cleaned the barracks some more. Very tedious, and it made us have to stay that much longer before we could graduate.
Number 5.
There was a guy in our division that spoke pretty fluent Russian, not ancestry or anything, just learned Russian in college. So for the first couple of weeks he'd reply in Russian as a joke, but our RDC told him to only speak in Russian for the duration of boot camp unless told otherwise. During battle stations he said something in English and he was punished because of it, but other than that, he kept it up. RDC even brought a YN who spoke Russian to see if he really was saying real stuff and not gibberish.
Number 6.
Commenter. I was in a US Air Force boot camp, and I was on duty as a dorm guard. We had a list next to the locked door to the dorm. The way it worked was, the T or DI and other services would come up to the door, knock, I'd check his ID, compare it to the list and either let him in or reject. Our TIS would try hard to get us to open the door for them without proper authorization. If you did, you could be recycled, which meant you went back 2 weeks in training and had to move dorms. This day, my TI tried to get me to let him in, bam bam bam. Me, sir, may I help you? TI, oh my god, it's freaking you. Open the door. Me, sir, may I see your authority to enter? TI, you wanna see that shit? Here. Holds up a banana. Me, holds up finger to banana. Banana. Drags finger down, names on list. Sir, may I refer you to the commander support staff? TI, no you may not. Open this damn door, bastard. Pounds the door for another 20 seconds, then lets himself in with a key. TI, good job. Bet if I'd have had some cookies you'd have let me in. Good times. Person B, ours would hold up a Mickey Mouse card. Look on the list, nope, no Mickey Mouse, until one day he changed the list and added Mickey Mouse. Our T was a SRA who never made staff sergeant, so he was being kicked out.
Number 7.
We decorated our drill instructor's office in the middle of the night before his birthday. Pink balloons, pink streamers, and a big pink cake. He found it about 10 minutes before morning PT. Made for a rough PT session, but worth it. Then, figuring he'd taught us a lesson, he ordered the class to the mess hall. We marched everywhere as a group with one of us calling cadence. The guy calling cadence did a little marching rendition of Happy Birthday to You as we were walking away, which sent him back into meltdown. We found ourselves back in the grass doing push-ups while he yelled at us about respect. As a rule, push-ups were always done in unison, and we had to shout teamwork on the way down and discipline on the way up. Halfway through his speech he realized we were yelling happy and birthday instead. At that point he just gave up and let us go.
Number 8.
We helped a dude go AWOL during basic training. He was a weird dude and wasn't super popular with the other guys in the platoon. We caught him crying in his bunk one night after lights out. Turns out his grandmother had died that week and he wasn't allowed to go home for the funeral because she wasn't his immediate family, mother, father, siblings. Turns out she raised him though, and he was contemplating running off. Later that week, we all scrounged up whatever cash we had and gave it to another guy in our platoon. We were in Fort Benning, Georgia, and the guy happened to be from that very town and his wife lived a few miles off post. We set it up so she'd come by in the middle of the night, we'd open the bay doors, which set off an alarm, and he ran out and jumped in her car. She drove him to the bus station and he bought a bus ticket home. Never heard from the guy again, but I hope he's doing alright.
Number 9.
A kid from Detroit I'll call Leotis. Even after 6 weeks of marching parties and push-ups, the Navy failed to beat the smartass out of that kid. He wore his cover at a rakish angle, marched like he was sashaying up and down 8 Mile, and had a smart remark for everything around him. I was impressed at his ability to suffer so much punishment without breaking. Then, around week 7, a very attractive female officer walked past our marching company. Leotis just could not contain himself. He catcalled her from the ranks. "Oh baby, y'all looking fine. Woo-wee." She called our company to a halt. She and the company commander pulled Leotis out of the ranks. She tore him up and down while he smiled at attention. She could see she was making no headway. Chief marched him off somewhere. The female officer gave us all a quick reminder of what a effing officer is and what a effing recruit is and how the two relate. We gave her yes ma'ams and avoided any more conflict. Never saw Leotis again. I wonder if he ever graduated or if he went right back to Detroit. He may have been a shitty recruit, but he was a tough nut to crack. Marilyn Monroe was not murdered by the US government. Hey everybody, welcome to ANECDOSED. People ask Reddit. What conspiracy theory do you believe to be true? What evidence led you to this conclusion?
Number 1.
Commenter. When Ted Kaczynski, the Unabomber, was at Harvard, he participated in a brutal psychological experiment led by Professor Henry Murray. The experiment lasted for 3 years and by many accounts they seemed to have an extreme impact on Kaczynski's psyche. I think this experiment was part of the CIA's MK-Ultra project and destabilized Kaczynski enough to where he eventually went on his reign of terror of sending bomb packages around the country. During the MK-Ultra project, the CIA collaborated with university professors on these mind control experiments, but a lot of the documentation was destroyed when people started to look into it. The Unabomber participated in an experiment that was a part of the MK-Ultra project that eventually led to him becoming a mass murderer. Person B. I think this one's proven, isn't it? Didn't someone FOIA documents a few years back that explicitly stated that Kaczynski was an MK-Ultra test subject? Not that the CIA set out to create a terrorist, but that he was accidentally set on that path by them. Person C. My understanding is that the professor was involved in MK-Ultra in some capacity, but that particular experiment was not related.
Number 2.
Commenter. I feel drugs like cocaine being cut with fentanyl. No dealer who wants to keep making money is going to cut their blow with fent. It seems like drugs are being intercepted, cut with dangerous shit and then sent back out. Evidence, they already did the same thing during alcohol prohibition. The people doing it are convinced they are doing society a favor. Person B. This has always been something in the back of mind. You're the first person I've heard say something like this though. I used to sell weed when I was younger, but I fraternized with people that sold much harder shit, heroin, coke and meth. In a competitive drug market, you get customers by being known as the guy that doesn't cut your shit. Now I've never done fentanyl, but I've done a lot of coke and opiates. Coke gets you up and opiates put you down, so why the F would any dealer trying to sell blow cut their shit with an opiate? It doesn't make any sense to me. I guess you could argue that the more down you get, the more you want to get up, so you buy more coke. But drugs don't always work like that, because there's usually a compounding effect that gets you more F up in a different way than either drug could F you up on its own. The whole thing just sounds fishy to me, like someone's either getting their facts wrong or there's some kind of conspiracy afoot.
Number 3.
Commenter. I don't necessarily believe this, but I've always speculated that a lot of priceless artwork and historical documents are actually replicas or copies. Obviously, a painting by a world-famous artist using a very specific technique would be very hard to fake, and I don't think that every art scholar in the world is paid off in some grand conspiracy. Rather, I just think that either the national treasures never left their vaults, or that some national treasures actually were lost to history but they were copied. Person B. If the copy is good enough, old enough, and all we've ever known, does it become a treasure in its own right? Person C. I mean, you can think of the United States Declaration of Independence and Constitution or the comparable documents of many other nations, I presume. There was definitely an original, but then several copies were made. The copies are considered nearly as valuable as the original. Slightly different, but related take on the matter.
Number 4.
Commenter. I have a theory that Tinder gives fake "you got a new match" notifications so people get excited and opens Tinder, which leads them to swipe more. Person B. Absolutely the case with Plenty of Fish. UK dating app, not sure if it's worldwide like Tinder. Quite easy to see the patterns, etc., and the repeated timings are almost down to within the minute. Also does get loads of matches within the first few days of starting an account, and then again after a few weeks to try and get you interested again.
Number 5.
Commenter. Disney made Zootopia partly to replace the Song of the South characters from Splash Mountain. Splash Mountain is really the only thing that still exists in the public eye from Song of the South, along with the song Zippity Doodah, since Disney wants to pretend that movie doesn't exist. So they created a movie featuring fox and rabbit characters that could replace Brer Fox and Brer Rabbit, and rethemed the entire ride to be Zootopia themed. While leaving some things, like the name, and the songs featured in the ride from Song in the South. There's also that Disney loves re-theming things to their IP now, getting rid of Maelstrom and bringing in a Frozen-themed ride. So, it would make more sense for them to re-theme a ride to a successful recent movie than keep a ride based on an old, mildly racist movie they're trying to forget. Person B. I could believe this, but Splash Mountain is so ridiculously popular that fans would riot if they tried retheming it. I do like the part about the new fox and bunny though.
Number 6.
Commenter: Area 51 is not a place for secret government or military testing with aliens and stuff. Instead, Area 51 is a scapegoat while shady behind the scenes stuff is going on at another military base that the general public doesn't know about. I mean, if you were really going to do something in secrecy, would you do it in the place where everyone thinks it is? Hell no. I don't have any specific evidence to back this up, but it makes sense, right? Person B: I was stationed at Holloman AFB, which is in Area 52. Miles upon miles of empty land in the desert, work buildings way out in the middle of nowhere. One of the largest air spaces in the continental US, and a monkey farm where they used to test on apes. I wouldn't be surprised if some sketchy shit happens out there.
Number 7.
I used to live outside Alamogordo in the 90s. I was just a few miles from Holloman. I was also a kid that was into amateur radio and checking out aircraft. I didn't have money or nice gear, but I had a telescope and a couple questionably legal unlicensed homebrew radio receivers. Based on what little I saw and heard, I would not be surprised if weird, shady or secret stuff was the order of the day at Holloman AFB. I saw some jet flights that were not on published schedules, so they were probably classified tests. I heard some control tower chatter that was using code words that weren't standard military jargon. Didn't add up to too much, but my whole family is military and they agreed it sounded like testing of stuff that hadn't been declassified yet.
Number 8.
Commenter: This is more of a personal conspiracy. I've been working as an American healthcare consultant for 2 years now, and I genuinely think that insurance companies are purposely denying claims, so that they can leverage capital for their beneficiaries' medical records. For example, one of my clients is a huge and important hospital system, had to deal with hundreds of thousands of dollars of medical claim denials. Humana suddenly decided it didn't believe any of those hospital stays were legitimate. They basically told my client to either fax hundreds of medical records or accept the zero pays. It's really suspicious and unfortunate. But when they have the money, what can you do? Person B: I bill Humana and they do that all the time. They send refund requests based on nothing and then we have to appeal by sending medical records, and even that's a crapshoot. Humana rejections suck. Recently they stated in a denial that plain old physical therapy was considered experimental treatment and they wouldn't pay for it.
Number 9.
Commenter: That the USA deliberately gets into an armed conflict every decade or so for the purpose of ensuring that at any given time, they always have a critical mass of soldiers with actual combat experience. They get in a lot of conflicts, and it seems highly probable that the leadership of a country that spends so much on national defense would highly value the institutional knowledge that comes from that kind of continuity of practical experience, even if it comes at a high human cost. Person B: Say what you like about American interventionism, but I think the world is safer now than it would be if the dominant power was China or Russia. As a descendant of, and just like the British Empire, the American Empire is overall a force of good in the world. Sure, they do some messed up things, but in the overarching story, the world owes a great debt to Britain, America, and to a lesser extent Germany and France. I'm sure the world would be a much worse place if China dominated world affairs. That's why I am somewhat worried about the rising power of BRIC nations.
Number 10.
Commenter: iHeartRadio coordinates commercial breaks to all take place simultaneously, so you're forced to listen to ads even if you change the station. They're practically a monopoly in my area and I notice it happens to me all the time. Person B: Radio stations, even competitors, do this on purpose. No hidden conspiracy needed. If your main competitor airs spots like commercials at 15, 30 and 45, it's in your interest to do the same. That way your listeners can't switch to music on another station during your spot break and potentially stay there. It's not like radio is secret. You can and should monitor competition and plan accordingly. To your original point, iHeart is just Clear Channel, and they tend to have a general template that all their stations follow. So one station will have its breaks at or around the same time as another. This is all based on a lot of market research and has generally been tested and refined over time to the point of ensuring rating success. Other stations follow suit. The negative side effect is the homogenization of radio. They all sound alike because it works, but it only works in a everything is mediocre kind of way. If someone does break from the pack and create a successful innovation, other stations follow and the homogenization continues. For a further example, notice that local TV news shows tend to cover weather, sports, local news, etc., all at or around the same basic time. Source: programmed radio stations for years. Worked for Clear Channel. Played the same damned classic rock songs in a different order day after day, week after week.
Number 11.
The Fresno police killed John Lang. It's been a while since I've read the story, so forgive me if I get something wrong. John Lang was a journalist who was very critical of the FPD. He wrote an article about how the police went into poor parts of the city and pulled cars over that parked in free parking lots or something like that. Eventually, he started noticing people watching his house, FBI style. One night he asked on Facebook if he could stay in someone's home for the night, as he knew the police were going to kill him that night. After no one let him, his house caught on fire. The coroner said that he was stabbed to death, but then retracted that statement. That last part is what makes me believe it's 100% real. The coroner now says it was a suicide, not an accident.
Number 12.
Commenter: Marilyn Monroe was murdered by the US government. She frequently attempted suicide and then called someone via her landline next to her bed to come save her. When she died, no traces of it were found within her stomach and her colon had been extremely cleaned. A theory is that she was murdered via enema poisoning. I haven't brushed up on it or researched in a long time, so I am probably remembering facts incorrectly. Person B: I'm pretty sure she was overprescribed a medicine by 2 diff doctors on accident. They're the ones who found her. They were the ones who wouldn't let anyone into her room for hours. She took an extra dose that day, then the second doctor gave her a medicated enema to calm her down and she OD'd. And then they made it look like suicide to not lose their licenses or their lives. It was an accident but definitely covered up. Make sure to share your personal story in the comments below and have the opportunity to be featured in a future video. Also, if you like these topics, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification button to continue seeing more content like this every day. See you next time.